Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Catholic Culture Podcast. I am excited to be talking to today's guest, who is a long-term leader in the pro-life movement. His organization, which he co-founded, 40 Days for Life, has seen great success not only in reducing the number of abortions, but in changing the hearts of mothers who considered abortion, as well as workers in the abortion industry. Shawn Carney is the CEO, president, and co-founder of 40 Days for Life, and author of a number of books, his latest one being To the Heart of the Matter, the 40-Day Companion to Live a Culture of Life in 2020. Welcome to the show, Shawn.
Good to be back. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
I've heard a lot about 40 Days for Life over the years. I'm not that knowledgeable about it from the inside since I haven't directly participated, but I do know that, for example, in my hometown of Manassas, Virginia, 40 Days for Life played a big part in shutting down the abortion clinic that had been there for many years. So I'm well aware that you guys have been doing great work, but I don't really know the story. So I'd love to hear about how it all started and how it got to where it is now.
Absolutely. And Manassas, you missed out, man, because that was a great 40 Days for Life campaign. And I wrote a book in 2018 called The Beginning of the End of Abortion. I did a whole chapter on the two wonderful gentlemen who led that campaign. And it was awesome because a pregnancy resource center went next door. They actually shared a wall, and they could literally hear the abortions, going on through the wall. So they built a Catholic chapel. And anyways, eventually the facility closed, but the abortionist was a fallen away Catholic, and he could hear them chanting the Divine Mercy chaplet in the chapel through the wall where he was doing abortions. And he just looked at his hands and thought, what in the world, has become of me? And he came outside and said, quote, "I think I need to see a priest." And he never did another abortion. So that facility closed.
I didn't hear that part. That's amazing. Yeah. I only knew that the place had shut down and that they kind of took over the space. But
yeah, no, I didn't mean to start the podcast with like the big dramatic story. But when you brought up Manassas, I was like, oh yeah, it's one of the best stories that we have. Since 40 Days for Life has gone around the world. So yeah, cool story, and it just great Catholic men leading that campaign, and literally brought the abortionists back to the church. So super cool. Then yeah, Catholic Charities is there now. So, but if you go back to your question, I mean, 40 Days for Life really is organic. It started in 2004. We did the first campaign. I was in college at Texas A&M at the time, and I worked part-time for a pro-life organization, and a man named David Beride hired me and my wife, and we saw our abortion numbers going up, so we prayed and thought, let's go all in for 40 days. God uses that number. He uses it to chastise and to challenge and to transform and all those good things, and to call his own people back to him. So we did 40 days of prayer, 40 days of fasting, and then a 40-day nonstop peaceful vigil outside of our Planned Parenthood abortion facility in College Station, Texas. And it took off. It dropped our local abortion numbers by 28%. This was the fall of 2004. But when it was over, we never imagined we'd hear the term 40 Days for Life ever again. And then city after city started reaching out, asking us how we did it. So in the fall of 2007, we launched 40 Days for Life as a nationally coordinated effort, hoping we'd get 25 cities, and we had 89 cities in 33 states. And so that started a fall campaign, and then we do a Lent campaign. So there's 2 per year. And now over these last 14 years, we've seen God just take this effort, and it's now been done in 1,000 cities in 65 countries. We're in the middle of the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever, which is the first post-Roe campaign. It's unbelievable, surprising even to me. I didn't expect we'd have more cities after Roe, because we lost a lot of cities for good reason. Their abortion facility closed, but we have 622 cities right now participating.
Wow. That's amazing. So to go back to Manassas then, maybe we can take that as an example of like how that sort of thing gets going and how it's organized and how it got to the point. How many years did it take before it had that result of shutting that place down?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we've closed 121 abortion facilities, including the one in College Station where it started, and that building's now the headquarters for 40 Days for Life. We have a beautiful memorial to the unborn behind it, and that's the facility that Abby Johnson ran. But Manassas, I believe they had a campaign for about 8 years, 7 years, somewhere in there. I'd visited a number of times, but the facility closed, and it was just awesome. And it was an answer to prayer. But Manassas is a good example where there's a great place to live, by the way. My brother-in-law lives there. You have a fairly, it's occupied Northern Virginia, as we know. So it's very pro-abortion.
Right.
And you can support abortion. It's available. It's legal. But when you change hearts and minds, you can close an abortion facility. And that's what they did. They were just persistent, and they kept going out there through their 40 Days for Life campaigns, and they kept building volunteers, and they had a pregnancy resource center that supported them, and then, of course, ended up moving in next door, and they closed. So it was market driven, if you will, with the means being, prayer and fortitude. So, that's such a good sign. And, of those 117 facilities that we've closed, we've had many facilities in Los Angeles. We've had 4 in Sacramento close. We've had a couple in the Bay Area close, Seattle, Chicago. The more, quote, liberal or pro-abortion place in America, the more effective the 40 Days for Life campaign is. I mean, California is our biggest state by far.
Wow. Now, you mentioned this pregnancy center that had already existed for many years, that AAA Women for Choice, as they called it. And it's just funny because, of course, this is exactly the sort of thing that understandably enrages the pro-abortion people. Is they're always saying, these pregnancy centers are tricking women and stuff like that. But actually, they're giving them accurate information. But in this case, there's a little bit of ingenuity, ingenuity in naming the place AAA Women for Choice, so that it's right at the beginning of the phone book, and it is honest in a way. It's offering a different choice, basically. But
yeah,
there's
it's
something great
smart
about that.
And being next door is smart. People accidentally walk into Burger King instead of McDonald's because they're next door. And
right.
That is we have to be very strategic for that, and it helps to attract people to the richness of the truth in every way. And you say the whole fake clinic movement, which really had a lot of backlash. I mean, the pregnancy centers are the heart of the pro-life movement. This is like hating the Catholic Church. And so you attack not our scandals or anything like that. You attack Mother Teresa, and it's just like, that's not really the approach to, this
which
is not the best way to hate
to Mother, which in fact people did attack Mother Teresa.
People did attack Mother Teresa, but now Mother Teresa is sort of untouchable.
Right.
And sort of the accepted Catholic by everybody. But the pregnancy resource centers are giving free diapers and ultrasounds and pregnancy tests and free, they're giving free stuff to women who want their free stuff. So when you say that they're a fake clinic, or that, as Elizabeth Warren said, they're torturing women, which was absurd. Wow. And she said that with like this terrified look on her face. It has a backlash. I mean, I've spoken at hundreds of pregnancy resource center like dinners and banquets. I always meet somebody who supports abortion. And they do the whole, I respect what you said, and I agree with some of it, but not all of it. But we all support this. We all support pregnancy resource centers. So it's such a loser argument, I think, to attack pregnancy resource centers. And God bless them. They've gone to work in the grassroots, and they're very important in a post-Roe America. They now outnumber abortion providers 5-1. That ratio is going to skyrocket in the next 12 months. So it's awesome.
So you think people, your average pro-choicer who's not like totally ideologically captured as like being pro-abortion per se is not really buying the anti-pregnancy center propaganda that's coming out right now?
No, I don't think so. I think it was easier 10 years ago because nobody really knew what a pregnancy center was. Like, oh, they get you in there and they try to get you saved, and it's really obnoxious. But now, I mean, they're medical. There's RNs. Some of them have doctors that volunteer. You're not going to see a doctor at Planned Parenthood unless you're having an abortion. You know, there's free material goods. They don't most of the time get any tax funding. I mean, these are just privately funded. This is like what religious people are supposed to do. This is what Christians are supposed to do, not rely on the government, but fund it locally. And so I think it may be a little of the Fulton Sheen thing. The ones that do hate pregnancy centers, like nobody really hates Catholics. They hate what they perceive to be Catholicism. And so it may be that if you find them, but it was not a winner in post-Roe. I mean, these lunatics that went out and firebombed these pregnancy centers, who the FBI, they haven't raided their house yet. But, you know, no one agrees with that. No one thinks of the evil part of the pro-life movement and thinks of the pregnancy resource centers. They think of us because we're out on the streets, so they hate us, which is fine.
Right.
But the do-gooders handing out the free stuff to women who want it, I think it's a real loser.
Listeners, let me take a moment to tell you about Catholic Culture's 2022 fall campaign. As you may know, the Catholic Culture podcast is a production of CatholicCulture.org, which has been one of the most reliable, independently run Catholic apostolates online since it started in 2003. And these days we're entirely funded by donations, so naturally the fall campaign is a very crucial time for us to muster the support we need to continue our work. So this year I'm happy to say that we are announcing our largest fall challenge campaign ever. A group of key donors is offering a generous $111,000 to match every gift that's made between October 20th and December 8th, the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. But in order to win the challenge, we have to raise the total amount by the deadline or else we'll lose that matching grant. Catholic Culture has a lot more than just podcasts going on. It has daily Catholic news and commentary, a rich array of resources for living the liturgical year, and a vast library of Catholic documents. And this material reaches not just people in the US or the Anglosphere, but millions around the world. We often hear from priests in places like India and Africa who say that they use our materials in preparing their catechesis or their preaching. And again, all this work depends on our users and our listeners, so please do consider giving. Even a little bit counts, especially since until December 8th, your contribution will be doubled. To donate, you can go to CatholicCulture.org/donate/audio or just click the link in the description. But if this isn't the right time for you to donate monetarily, then we ask that you pray for us, just as we pray for all our listeners, viewers, readers, and benefactors daily. Thank you, and God bless you. Well, you just mentioned the FBI. Now, this has been the case. It's been the case for decades that, you know, people who are doing sidewalk, you know, counseling, activism, things like that, for the pro-life movement are sort of the most vilified, you know, by the media, by the pro-abortion people, in terms of vastly exaggerating the number of sort of harassment incidents that happen or violence, and, you know, downplaying the number of the violence that's done against, you know, pro-life sidewalk people, and the harassment that's aimed at them, and portraying them as all being angry and screaming and stuff like that. But now we've got this increasingly aggressive federal backlash against such people. I mean, just in the past couple of weeks, I guess it's timely that we're talking about this now, because just in the past couple of weeks, there's been a couple of arrests or a couple of charges filed. So I'm kind of wondering, are we seeing a lot of that? Is it really as coordinated an effort as it looks like by the federal government under the Biden administration to sort of do everything it can to sort of chill pro-life work?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, a lot of it started to make sense when we recently, just like over a week ago, found out that the DOJ set up a task force to target pro-life groups and pro-life volunteers. And that's why Mark Houck, the Catholic dad of 7 kids, he had his house raided. He was participating in 40 Days for Life when when this incident happened, when the guy was cussing at his son and they got in this altercation, and the local authorities were like, this is dumb. There's nothing here. We're not pressing charges.
Right.
And the DA in Philly hates 40 Days for Life and is pro-abortion. But he's like, I'm not charging this guy. So then we provided the attorneys for Mark and with our friends at Thomas More. And so then a year passes. He finds out he's the target of an FBI investigation for a face violation. He's like, hey, well, what? Like, I'll turn myself in. They never replied to his lawyers saying he turned himself in. Like, this is absurd. And then they raided his house early in the morning. So that is dangerous. And now we're providing, our general counsel is also co-counsel and representing Mark to defend himself. He's got the Thomas More guys. He also has a Philadelphia celebrity attorney. So he's got a great legal team. And I think he'll win for sure. It's absurd to go at gunpoint for something like this. You know, the guy has no record. So once you have a task force that targets people for their opinion, you know, your banana republic. This is what they do. They target their political enemies. And I think the feds, one thing that I didn't see coming post-Roe, and we saw a lot coming. We knew there would be a little spike in violence, and then it would go away, and it did. But the aggression of the federal government, this is the irony with Roe v. Wade getting overturned during a time when we have the most pro-abortion government in our history, aside, of course, from the Supreme Court. And so it's very alarming. It's unprecedented. It's outrageous that something like that would happen. And the other people, they're not associated with 40 Days for Life, but I think there were 11 other arrests for different forms of activism. But for Mark, it is very, it is literally 1 in a million for us. We have 1 million volunteers. You know, everybody signs a statement of peace. We don't get in altercations. We don't, you know, we're all peaceful. We're all law-abiding. We work very closely with local law enforcement. We love local law enforcement. We have a lot of, you know, spouses of cops and sheriff deputies who's, you know, they go out and they participate in 40 Days for Life. So the feds overreaching and saying, this is now, we're going to charge you with a felony, it's alarming. It's still safe to go pray at a 40 Days for Life. I mean, Mark's case, there was an altercation. But it definitely, I think, gives people pause. But we have to overcome that. I mean, it's the world. It's persecution. It'll probably go away a lot with the November elections if they continue to investigate the FBI. But the FBI's stock is in the toilet. I mean, there's a lot of liberals that I don't want Planned Parenthood to be banned from having their rallies. I mean, we're all for freedom of speech. We have to win this the right way, which is hearts and minds, and that's what's happening. And they're trying to win it by force, which is you ought not be outside in front of an abortion facility. And so I think it's going to have a lot of legal repercussions on many different fronts. But to answer your question, it is as serious because they set up a task force for this.
And what is FACE? You mentioned FACE.
You can't block the entrance of an abortion facility. And one of the most outrageous things about charging Mark with FACE is, number one, it happened a year ago. So all of a sudden, local law enforcement isn't charging him and the feds are. But the little altercation that he had where he's telling the guy to leave his son alone, that happened, that wasn't even near the abortion facility. So that's what's so bad about it, among other things. So the FACE, that's real. I mean, if you go and you chain yourself to the doors of an abortion facility, you're going to the penitentiary for 10 years. You know, that's a felony. So that's very real. But that is hardly the same as telling some guy to quit using the F-bomb to your 12-year-old son. And
right.
I think that's the stretch.
The one other interview that I heard you give with Phil Robertson, I think you mentioned that 40 Days for Life has gone international, right?
Yes.
And so that means I'm sure you're aware, more aware than I am, of what's going on with Britain, with laws in certain places preventing prayer or demonstration of any kind in areas around an abortion clinic. Can you tell me what's going on there? Is that something that you've had to deal with there?
Yeah, that has been a huge priority for us, because freedom of speech, when it's attacked in the UK, and sometimes they're better defending freedom of speech than we are. It'll trickle over here. And that's exactly what's happened. So the United Kingdom introduced buffer zones in some of their jurisdictions. And it's not like buffer zones in the United States. A buffer zone in the United States said, we're going to create a law. No one can stand within 50 meters of an abortion facility. Okay. And it doesn't matter if you're pro-life or you're pro-abortion. And the Supreme Court 9 times has rejected them. 8 times, unanimously. Everybody. I mean, Ginsburg called buffer zones un-American. And it all has to do with abortion. It's all pro-lifers. Scalia had this great line where he said, standing out in public and giving pro-life literature to somebody considering abortion is exactly what the Constitution protects. We're not supposed to just talk about sports and the weather, right, in public discourse. So it's like this great Scalia line that he had a million of during his wonderful life. So in America, it's looked down on. We don't have buffer zones currently. But hold that thought. So in England, they introduce them. And 40 Days for Life continues. They arrested a 76-year-old grandmother in Liverpool for praying the rosary. We sued and won. Even the judge, the great British judge in court, told the city attorney was like, well, we're not targeting them because of their view on abortion. And the judge says, well, madam, it certainly appears that way. And he sided with us. And then we had another case that we won in Nottingham, where Robin Hood is from. And so we won that case for buffer zones. Well, now Parliament has officially voted to essentially ban 40 Days for Life. They don't want us in the country. We didn't invade. They're doing the stupid thing where they're like, and you Americans are coming over here. It's all run by Brits, and Scots in Scotland. So it is, I wish I could sit here. I don't wish I could sit here, but it would be different if I was sitting here going, we really regret that one of our volunteers shot the abortion doctor, but don't throw us out of the country. There's never been an incident, no arrests, nothing. It is merely the bigotry of their politicians who don't like our opinion on abortion. And that's it. I wish it was more sophisticated. It's classic bigotry. You are pro-life. Because unlike the buffer zones here, where you could be pro-abortion and I can be pro-life, neither one of us can go there. That's not how it is over there in the UK. It's if I'm pro-life and that's my opinion, I can't go there. But otherwise, somebody else can go and sell barbecue. They can be pro-abortion. They can do whatever they want. It's my mere opinion. And that was many of the jokes that were made by the people defending freedom of speech in the UK were saying, well, all the abortions are done in a hospital, most of them. I mean, what if I accidentally cut my leg with my chainsaw and I hobble over to the hospital, but I'm pro-life and I'm going in? Am I breaking the law? So it is absolutely shameful. And one of the great irony in this is that we just won a huge buffer zone case. It's so ridiculous. We got to do all this legal stuff just to do basic freedom of speech, but this is where we are. So we won this huge case in Germany, and we lost it in England. So I know my grandfather is rolling over in his grave. He was in the Pacific during World War II. I know all these Brits whose dads and granddads served to get rid of the Nazis, and now they're shaming us by having more freedom of speech than you have in England. And so, but they did it. They just passed it last week. It's official. We've been sort of in this rhetoric battle trying to prevent them from doing it. And we've gotten great coverage from the media. The media over there hates us, but overall, they're actually very fair. The Brits don't like it when I say that, but maybe it's because they have an accent. The insults don't seem as horrible as over here. But the media has been very good to us. They covered it. They covered the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it passed, and we're going to sue them. And that's where we're at.
Wow, well, there you go. Now, is the plan? Are you going to wait and see how it falls out legally, or are you just going to defy it and keep going and force the issue in that sense?
That each campaign leader will decide what they can do. So I think it's 250 meters or 150 meters. It's this ridiculous thing where you would have to stand. So that's how they want to get rid of the essence of a 40 Days for Life campaign. And so I think a lot of people will. I think a lot of people will just abide by that and move while we're in the process of suing them. I got the sense from reporters and other people that Parliament was not confident it would hold up in court. I think they're trying to send a message to us and to all their wonderful 40 Days for Life volunteers in England to shut up and go away. That's essentially their message. And so, but I got the sense from many people that I've talked to, and certainly from our lawyers over there, that this is more than winnable in the UK.
Yeah. You mentioned things you were and things you weren't expecting after Roe. Now, I always thought that if Roe v. Wade was overturned in my lifetime, and I'm not sure that I've still fully processed that it that it has been, but I always thought, there's going to be blood in the streets, there's going to be, rioting and burning, and that indeed is what they were threatening, but it doesn't seem to have gone that way. I was really concerned about that. I was concerned it was going to be like, the summer of 2020, and in fact, it was much less than the riots over racial issues. Yeah.
They're not even in the same league. And
I'm wondering, why is that? Why is that?
Because this is awkward. We cannot do surgeries on unborn children and have their pictures on our refrigerator and prevent pregnant women from getting on roller coasters or slamming 10 whiskeys at a bar. We can't put Scott Peterson in prison for second-degree murder for his unborn child, Connor. We can't do all of those things and then turn on a light switch of schizophrenia and say, yeah, we could dismember a baby at 25 weeks. And so this relationship, it was going to be nowhere close to George Floyd because there's not a grassroots pro-abortion movement. But the race card crowd, or the let's have another reason to burn down our country crowd because America basically still has slaves and is a racist country, that crowd, it feeds off those events, and then it spreads like wildfire. But abortion is different. People want to force you to talk about race. They want to force your sort of conversion to admit that either you're a racist or our country's racist or whatever. There's sort of an aggression there. Abortion advocates will never talk about abortion, And one of the predictions that I made that I think played out was that the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood, completely unprepared and ill-equipped. You could go through their Twitter account. I did a vlog on it in June. After the leak on May 3rd, whenever it was, all the way to the end of June, you go to Planned Parenthood's Twitter account. They're 100 years old, largest abortion operation in the world. And you would have no idea there was a leak. You would have no idea that Roe was going to be overturned. It was all transgender stuff, Gay Pride Month, get rid of guns. It was just the definition of mission drift. And part of it is they have a very incompetent CEO after having a very competent, unfortunately, CEO for 12 years in Cecile Richards. And the lady now is just not doing a good job and is not strong. And everybody can see it. They're all over the map. So they were not prepared for it. Their messaging was terrible, and their messaging was basically go out and vote, which is not going to happen either. That's another prediction that it's very underwhelming response.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned that they had that event, the George Floyd event. There was no event. It was a legal event, and whether they should or they shouldn't, Americans don't get nearly as excited about legal events as they do with events that has a person and an image. Like you were saying,
Yeah, that happens on the other end. We certainly did it with Roe. Every year, every week that you have Roe, it gets easier. Look at the gay marriage stuff. I mean, we just made up. Our Supreme Court, as Scalia said, just made up gay marriage out of thin air.
Right.
And as he said, because they went to Harvard, Yale, or all Jewish or Catholic and hardly represent America. But we just made that up. And, that's a culture war that we lost big time. But everybody just moved on. I mean, we're the first civilization to redefine marriage. It's pretty scary, and now we're in this experiment. And then now, of course, that just leads to all the gender craziness and madness. But people move on. They move on, and you're going to see that on the positive end with the overturning of Roe. And it happened a lot quicker, actually, I think, because there was a lot, I think it was divine providence, the timing of it, because we just got a lot of garbage going on. We have inflation, we have high gas prices, there's sort of this walk on eggshells thing in America, and I think people don't have the energy, the average person, to be worried that the Supreme Court overturned Roe. Also, half the country doesn't care because they live in a pro-abortion state and has no impact on their life. So I think that's going to be underwhelming, the voter turnout for that single issue. The single issue pro-abortion vote is not big. It's not a big constituency where you vote because you're so pro-abortion. It's big for pro-lifers. They're big single issue voters, but not so much the pro-abortion side. I think they're overestimating that, and I definitely think they're overestimating that these women are like running around clamoring to get on an airplane and fly to California and New Jersey and have an abortion. Distance is a huge deterrent. So we will see a significant drop in surgical abortions for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank God for that. Let me ask you a different question. And I don't know how much this is something that you can even concern yourself with, but do you think that there's a lot more infighting in the pro-life movement than there was, 10, 20 years ago?
No way. No way. And 10, 20 years ago, it was, or 20 years ago, I would say it was a lot higher. And I know I was just getting started in the pro-life movement, but no, it's awesome. I mean, I look at things, and I know 40 Days for Life becomes like the glue for a lot of groups and communities. We're local, we're in 1,000 cities. So we work closely with the pregnancy centers, and we're obviously on the activism side of the movement. But even politically, I think certain states have, those infighting, but nationally, it's been very unified. It's been awesome. It's one of the reasons we're winning.
Yeah. I guess I meant I meant sort of ideologically, like, online, like sort of people trying to undermining the pro-life movement from within by sort of saying if you're not truly pro-life unless you support these 500 other things that aren't essential, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
I just think that stuff doesn't bother me, and they'll attack me, and they'll attack 40 Days for Life, like until you say that you're going to feed every child in Africa. How dare you talk about abortion? And you sort of. And we see that in Catholicism, I will out Catholic you any day. We homeschool our kids. Well, we homeschool our kids and only in Latin all day, and we homeschool our kids and teach them Greek. Anytime you have something important, you're going to have those few individuals that sort of want to do that. So that doesn't bother me because abortion's important and it's passionate. And I think if there's infighting, like we need this bill, with these compromises. No, we need this bill with, no compromises, whatever it is. And I'm so glad I'm not part of that. You got to get all that out to end abortion in your state. And that means debate and passionate debate and disagreements.
Right.
And I think that that's healthy. It's not a yes, ma'am movement. But the people that go around and say you're not really pro-life because they just appoint themselves Pope and President, and they get to dictate who is what level you're at. So, I don't think that a whole lot, but if I do, I ignore them.
I do think the overturning of Roe was a clarifying event for some of those people, because the people who were sort of getting into that kind of rhetoric, but were, in their hearts, they were just pro-life people, and they weren't deliberately sort of parroting pro-abortion talking points, which a lot of those are pro-abortion talking points that maybe some well-meaning pro-lifers started using themselves, to try to get people on board with whatever welfare program or immigration or whatever else, they might be in favor of. But then some of those people actually, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, they sort of came out as being like, I'm not happy that this has been overturned. And I think that the other people who are well-meaning and sincerely pro-life sort of realized, like, oh, these people were not on our side, all along. They were sort of infiltrating it to use it to sort of distract it into other areas.
This is the comparison, I think, to the George Floyd situation, because what the 2020 debacle of just a year and all the race stuff, and now we're supposed to only see color, right? All of that shows what a harsh judge of history our country is. I mean, when you're tearing down statues of Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, thankfully, it's been interesting and disappointing to see how many people are running to be on the wrong side of history when it comes to Roe v. Wade. Our Supreme Court has dehumanized people twice. They dehumanized blacks with Dred Scott, and then the next time it wasn't the color of their skin, it was their size and location, where they dehumanized Roe v. Wade. Women didn't vote on it. Feminists didn't vote on it. It was given to us by an all-male Supreme Court. So they corrected their error. To say that that is not the right thing to do, or that is not good, or to celebrate it, or to have this feeling like you're supposed to walk around and apologize for Roe v. Wade being overturned is absurd and dangerous. And there were a lot of people when they freed the slaves. You wanted them free, you better hire one. What's it going to do to our economy? It's the same language that you hear, and the conscience of America eventually got to us with slavery. But that's the only other example we have where we dehumanized a group of our own population. And so I am just shocked to see some people not even question. I mean, you could take your sort of middle of the road soft Christian when the Supreme Court invented gay marriage, and they come out and they're for it, and they legalize it and all this, and the gay people are running around and they're celebrating. I mean, your middle of the road Christian would be like, I don't know, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was on the wrong side of history, and and you don't. I think you see some of that for Roe v. Wade, but I'm amazed at people just darting out saying, now we need abortion at 40 weeks.
Right. Yeah. More extreme abortion law than most European countries.
Like, what if it's a baby? And what if abortion kills a baby? And that, some people are thinking about that. Like, I think there's an argument to be the opposite, that it's shameful. It took 50 years for the Supreme Court to correct their error when we're running around, putting our grandkids' ultrasounds on the refrigerator. We're just schizophrenic with the unborn. And so the lack of fear of being on the wrong side of history is surprising to me. And it's the closed-mindedness.
Well, Let's go back before we wrap up to 40 Days for Life itself. And we've been talking about political stuff for some of this, or sort of ideological battles. But I wanted to ask about the spiritual warfare aspect of that. How important is that to you?
It's very important on the level that you have to acknowledge it, and you have to deal with it, and you have to embrace it with the sacraments. That this, a 5-year-old knows that life begins at conception. We don't believe it does, like Charlemagne probably believed it, or General George Washington believed it. We know that life begins at conception. The argument part, the biology part, and I wrote a book called What to Say When, and it came out last year, and it's a pro-life apologetics book, and it takes everybody through in a very simple way. And has some of those new bizarre arguments in there too, like forced birth. But this is a crisis of the will. It's not necessarily that we kill the baby. That's awful and horrific and a tragedy. But it's that we want to. That's what's worse. It's that it's not the Nazis or the communist or Al-Qaeda coming in to kill us. It's our own parents who are trying to will us out of existence. And that is very dangerous, because the world crashes down on genocide and Holocaust. But you can't with abortion. It's all internal. I mean, 95% of the countries in the world have abortion, and it's supported by their government. We've never done this before at this scale, with 56 million abortions a year. And that's a crisis of the human heart and the soul. And you can be an atheist and be pro-life. It's totally easy. It's like the easiest intellectual position on earth, right? It is not difficult, and the 5-year-old knows it. But that's a frustrating existence, because you're not going to be able to explain how in the world we got here, or why we do it. Why we do it. And that's the richness of the church's teaching, that this is a crisis of conscience. It's a crisis of the will, which is the most dangerous part of our nature. It's capable of great sanctity, and it's capable of great evil. And that means that in the end, the foundation of this is a spiritual battle. It's a spiritual battle. And I think people could be very naive saying, well, there's no spiritual warfare when it comes to abortion. I don't know anybody who would say that.
Yeah.
And so
prayer, it's more than it's 40 Days for Life is not just an activist movement.
No, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. I'd work somewhere else, because you wouldn't make it. You wouldn't make it. And our little handbook for our team and for our wonderful volunteers is Soul the Apostolate, which is a great spiritual classic by Father Jean-Baptiste Chautard. And it takes you through, because you can run out and try to save the world and you'll lose your soul. And the devil will just be laughing, as you walk right into his arms, thinking you're so great and patting yourself on the back. So prayer the contemplative always has to come first. Always.
Wow.
And we have sort of a monastic view of that, even though we're activists, because we have to take care of our own souls, or we're no good to a woman who feels like she has no other option than to have an abortion. And we're certainly no good to the abortion workers.
Right. Wow. Thank you. I'm so impressed and moved by what you just said. And that's in a world that prizes activism, and in a church that in a Catholic culture, I should say, that often prizes argument and complaint, and, infected by that worldly spirit too much of the time, to hear you say that the soul of the apostolate is your manual, is deeply impressive. And I hope that you'll always keep that spirit, in the decades to come, because I'm sure there will be decades of work ahead of you.
Yeah, and we send that book out for free to our local leaders, and it's funny because you'll get somebody who's like, "Oh, I haven't read that since college. I needed this," or you'll get a Catholic or non-Catholic, and they're like, "I've never even heard of this," and it kicked my rear end, And so it's a great book. It's such a great book, and it can't be a talking point. Prayer and fasting, it has to be real. And when you see the things going on in our culture, you got to have your ducks in a row spiritually, or you're just not going to make it.
All right, Shawn, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anytime.
If you would recommend one of your books for people to get, which one would it be to start with?
What to Say When, especially now with all these crazy arguments. So it's What to Say When, the complete new guide to discussing abortion. Matt Walsh wrote the foreword, and it's like 170 pages. It's simple, it's easy, and it's our bestseller.
Thank you so much, Shawn. God bless you.
Thank you.